Being dangerously hot and bothered. Now, for some years and for a number of reasons, I've taken a preference in having a shower instead of a bath. The convenience and speed that showering provides is clearly the main advantage of doing this, and greatly reducing water consumption is another. I also find the concept of taking a soak in a bath, surrounded by the dirt I want to clean away, a bit of a contradicting exercise. But I do see that there are circumstances where the therapeutic benefits of having a soak take priority. You see, I have a condition that sometimes creates muscle spasms and tension, resulting in pain or discomfort in very hot and cold temperatures. So the opportunity to relax in a bath of Epsom salt or similar remedies was usually very helpful to alleviate my symptoms and enhance my state of well-being. A number of years ago, after being diagnosed with my condition, I had become aware that if I got too hot, a sense of lethargy often took over my body, causing me to temporarily slow down or gradually ground to a halt. But a cold drink, a fan, or simply just stopping activities and resting for a while was usually all that was required to cool me down and allow a full return of my body functions again. Then one day things changed, and I found myself talking to my spirit guide. I remember the evening of this day like it was yesterday. The sky had been covered in a grey blanket for most of the day, and the rain had fallen continuously. The weather had been pretty miserable all day, and I wasn't looking forward to my 4-mile cycle home. But I just kept visualising being sat with a glass of wine in my lounge room at home. I love this room because a few years back I restored the cast iron fireplace and enjoyed this space, listening to the crackling sound of the fire, the smell of burning logs, and watching the flames dancing. It was a real treat, especially after a really busy, stressful day. So I held on to the thoughts of being in front of the fire because by the time I set off on my bike, the rain was falling heavier than it had done all day. And despite all the waterproof gear I was wearing, I was thoroughly drenched by the time I got home. So I was looking forward to actually just having a long soak in the bathtub. Here I added a few drops of my favourite bath oil to the warm water, and I lit some tea lights just to create a really nice atmosphere before getting into the bath. I sighed deeply as I closed my eyes and getting comfortable and getting ready to just soak the whole day away. I was looking forward to wrapping up in a nice thick bathrobe afterwards and then going down and sitting in front of the open fire with that glass of wine. After maybe about half an hour, I became aware that I was slowly sliding into the water. So, as usual, I tried to move myself around. I tried to lift my knees and move my arms to prop myself back up again. This is when I realised that I couldn't feel my limbs anymore. I tried to move, but the whole of my body felt so weighted, and the water began to feel like concrete that had just been poured over me in the bath. I carried on sliding further down into the bath so that eventually water fully covered my shoulders and was now approaching my chin. I could feel my heart beginning to pound so deeply that the water over my chest appeared to have a ripple. I tried to call out to my husband and daughter, who were somewhere in the house. I tried to shout, but the only sound that came from my mouth was a whisper. My head felt stuffy and I couldn't think about the next thing to do. All the while I was fixed on a sensation of the water level reaching my bottom lip. I still couldn't move my limbs, and suddenly I just began to cry quietly. as I asked my higher power to help me get out. I was gripped with fear and terrified that I was going to drown and that my family would be the ones to find me in this state. I imagined my husband, my daughter, blaming themselves for not being there to save me. And at that point, I just really felt that I couldn't let this happen. I decided I couldn't go. I closed my eyes and started breathing deeply, and slowly I began to visualize being able to move my left arm to reach the chain attached to the bath plug. When I could eventually feel the chain, it took everything I had, and it took a while for me to hook my finger around the chain, slowly pulling it away so that it was pulling the plug from the plug hole. Listening to the water draining away was emotionally overwhelming. I cried with joy, but I still knew that it wasn't quite over because I hoped that the water would drain away quicker than the rate that I was still sliding under the water. At last I was lying in an empty bathtub, now cooling to the point that I felt quite cold, and as my body temperature dropped, I was able to start moving my limbs and wriggling my fingers and toes again. I lay in an empty bath suffering from shock, but thanking my spirit guide for keeping me company while I worked out my survival plan. When I eventually got out of the bath and out of the bathroom, my husband couldn't get a proper sentence out of me. So, what was actually happening during this time? Known as heat intolerance, temperature or heat sensitivity, there is a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which is responsible for controlling your body temperature, keeping it at the right temperature in hot or cold conditions. It does this by sending signals to the body to start sweating if it gets too hot or shivering if it gets too cold. For those who have an existing medical condition, the hypothalamus does not work as well as it should, and so may not be able to regulate the body so easily. Many people enjoy warmer temperatures, but some people with autoimmune or neurological conditions, such as multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, and Parkinson's, to name a few, have problems in the heat. Difficulties regulating body temperature can be a serious issue for this group of people because the heat can stop nerve fibres from working properly. This means that sometimes messages cannot get through parts of the brain, leaving sufferers to experience fatigue, weakness, difficulty breathing, and problems with balance or vision. These symptoms compromise safety and may create dangerous situations similar to the one that I had. But after almost a decade of avoiding the bathtub, I decided that with careful planning and now with a better understanding, I could return to having the occasional soak because I really find this beneficial. What are the things I do or use to make bath time safe again for me? One of the things I use is a rubber bath mat, the ones with the little suction pads on them. And I put this in the bath before I fill it up with water and definitely before I get in. And I find that as well as just helping to reduce the general accidents that can occur in a bathtub, it also reduces my ability of slipping and sliding down while I'm in the bath like I did before. The other thing is to ensure that the chain that's attached to the bath plug is quite close to you, somewhere where you can reach it and pull it if you need to quite quickly. We were very fortunate that our bath has a plug hole that's positioned in the middle of the bathtub instead of the head or the tail of the bath, which was a real saving grace, because had it been at the opposite side of where I was lying, there's no way that I would have been able to reach it in time. So it's well worth considering this, that if your bathtub has got a plug hole that's one side or the other, this is where you need to be sat, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable because maybe you're sitting leaning on the bath tap or sitting on the plug hole or something like that. You need to be very close to that plug hole. The other thing I do is I keep a container of ice cold water next to me on the rim of the bathtub, just so that as soon as I start to feel like I'm getting quite warm or I'm overheating, I can reach and drink as much of it as possible, just to keep my body temperature at a level that means that I don't become overheated. But before all of this, if I do decide that I'm going to have a soak in the bath, I let a member of the family know that this is what I'm going to do, and I also make sure that I don't lock the door